Hi, this is Mike Hendrickson from Strata in Barcelona. I'm here with David Richards. David, how you doing?
Very good. Pleasure to be here.
So you're the CEO and founder of WANdisco.
Correct.
And you gave a talk this morning, and you kind of talked about where the data industry has come from and where we are. And one of the themes I've been hearing, both in New York and here, is that data is now in practice. It used to be a theoretical thing that we were all talking about, what it could do for us in the future. So can you tease out a little bit why you think it's really here and in prime time now?
That's a great question. I think it's interesting, just in the blink of an eye, how far we've come. You know, this open source product that started off life as a stuffed toy that lives in a sock drawer in Doug Cutting's kid's bedroom somewhere, is probably the most disruptive bit of technology that we've possibly seen in a lifetime. I used to get a lot of questions about when is this going to happen, when is this move going to happen, and I think we've seen this movie before. You know, we used to have these things called mainframe computers. That industry was disrupted when computing power was distributed, right? We got these things called three-tier client server systems. So we had Microsoft and Intel on the desktop, and these new companies, massive new companies were created. We got middleware companies like SAP, and we got database companies like Oracle. And really what's happening now is that three-tier client server industry, that's, you know, all storage companies and so on, are being disrupted by these data-rich applications where applications and data are really being built in the same place. And I think in 2014, this year, in my talk I described it as the year of the proof of concept. It's where companies would throw up data lakes, build some test clusters, maybe run applications in parallel, so maybe not fully replace those existing storage systems and existing applications, but at least begin to try out this new breed of applications. But 2015, we're seeing wholesale moves of these companies into production, and not just into production with sort of edge case applications, with mission critical systems.
So someone mentioned, it might have been your slides, it could have been someone else's, that there were 73% of enterprises have moved to big data solutions.
Yeah.
If that's the case, are the 27% still the mainframe people, or what's wrong with those 27%? I mean, shouldn't everyone be having a data solution?
Well, I think the stat was in Mike's slides, and it was from Gartner, and it was 73% of all organizations are thinking of or are implementing big data products. So, you know, Mike described this as a $1 trillion market. So for that to happen, a lot of companies have to adopt big data, right? If he thinks it's a $1 trillion marketplace, and I think he's right. Yep. I remember back in the day when the CEO of DEC rather unfortunately said, "Why would anybody want a PC at home?" So there's going to be, you know, the Luddites. There's going to be the people that adopt this technology much later than others. I personally think of the global 2,000 will adopt big data in the next few years, in the upcoming years. The majority of which might do it next year.
So it's either data or perish in a way, because everyone's going.
If the data will become very quickly the fundamental source of competitive advantage across every industry. It would be a bit like not adopting computer systems, right? Virtually, I can think of no industry in the world today that doesn't use computer systems and software to gain strategic advantage. Exactly the same thing is going to happen in the big data marketplace. For example, I don't know, I would have some very severe questions about anybody that would build an application that wasn't designed to run in memory. As the price of RAM comes down exponentially, why would you go through the cost and expense of building applications on disk if you could really build them? If you had a choice, you should always build it in memory.
Yes. So can you tell me a little bit more about what WANdisco does and why you guys are different in the market? Because, you know, I know you've been around for a while, but I'm not sure that you're in like the top of mind for everyone. So can you explain exactly what you guys do?
So WANdisco's heritage, I mean, our name sounds a bit crazy, doesn't it? It sounds like we make disco balls and, you know, we're sort of John Travolta doing this sort of stuff. It's actually an acronym. It stands for Wide Area Network Distributed Computing. And the company's founded on a very complex patent, which is the way in which you achieve WAN scope active-active replication. So the data center is no longer a single point of failure. We can replicate an entire data center of Hadoop data anywhere in the world without issues associated with latency and so on. And the patents are actually built on something called Paxos, which is extremely complicated, very difficult, very, very difficult to use, and notoriously complex. But we figured out a way in which we could use Paxos to deliver guaranteed availability, reliability, and performance of data, even over a wide area network.
So reliability is the key there,
Yeah.
if you're doing backup?
So in my slides today, I talked about the rubber meeting the road, and really, for enterprises to adopt this stuff, we have to think about three key things: operational tooling and support for the products. And I think companies like Cloudera and Hortonworks and so on are doing a great job of that, you know, being the distribution vendors. We have to think about security, and there's some big
privacy with that.
Privacy and so
Yep.
on, yes,
Yep.
and on-disk encryption
Yep.
and splicing of data and so on. And we have to think about reliability and resilience of these systems, because if I'm going to use this in a trading system, CIO of a bank was telling me the other day that a 1 minute outage is $100 million of lost transactions per minute. That's not trivial, right? So you have to, these are big problems that have to be solved.
Yes. So if you could take us forward, let's say we're having this conversation next year in London, which is where we're going to have Strata Hadoop next year, is in London. Can you take me forward 12 months from now and what you think the story and your keynote would be then?
The story next year and the keynote next year, I think, will be stories about companies that are using this and what the outcomes were.
Their benefits.
The benefits.
Yep.
And it will be, you know, the bank that can, you know, I said
the happy birthday.
The happy birthday. The wealth management division of a bank that wants to wish their customers a happy birthday. These are complex, they sound simple questions, but the way in which you get there is pretty complex, and these companies are deploying this technology today. So I think fast forward 12 months, we'll be talking about the herd stampeding towards implementing this technology, and that herd effect will happen very quickly. I mean, a lot of the banks, virtually all the banks that I know today have big data projects, Hadoop projects, where they're looking at highly strategic ways in which they can gain benefits from this.
Do you think it'll also be better for the consumer by that time too? Because I know one thing that kind of annoys me is when I'm getting ads that are targeted to me specifically, but they're ads for O'Reilly.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, why would I buy my own service?
I think big data will, and that's a great point actually, I think big data will take a leap forward. I think we'll go beyond the kind of, I think ads are boring. I mean, I don't know who said it, but you know, all the brain power that companies like Google have into
To put ads in front of
put
us.
ads out. I think, you know, we did an implementation with the University of California at Irvine, who are using it in very interesting ways to plot sepsis to save people's lives. I think big data and Hadoop will take a leap forward, and actually the market will begin to talk about those kinds of issues, not advertising, which is, I think you're right. I think it's spooky and a bit boring.
Yeah. So if there was one thing you would put big data on, or one solution, one problem in the world that you would like to see big data solve first, what would that be?
We had a big data breakfast right before Strata in New York, and the head of the United Nations the head of data for the United Nations came to speak, and that on their agenda, the top sort of 18, 19 items like poverty and so on are actually data problems. And I would just, you know, Mike Olson in his keynote talked about how this is going to touch every aspect of life. Data and big data can be a great equalizer in the world and solve some of the world's great problems, and it will unlock some of the world's great secrets. And I think using it for the good and those examples, I'd love to see the United Nations use this to solve some of the world's big problems.
Excellent. David, we'll look forward to seeing you next year in London.
It's going to be a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.